Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, Santiago.
Morning.
For about 3 minutes before I get started, if I can recommend something, take a look and try to find the Q&A option here in Google Meet. Let's do the Q&A, all of the questions that you guys have, send them through that Q&A option. It's way better than the chat. I mean, feel free to use the chat just for talking and commenting and whatnot. I use Google Meet in my classes. The cohort, the machine learning engineering cohort that I teach, I use Google Meet. It's amazing, way better than Zoom, and the chat gets lit. It's a lot of comments there. I even started publishing the recordings. So I started publishing the video and the chat because there was a lot of information in the chat. But for question and answers, the Q&A option is much better, more organized, and it will allow me to just tick off every question as soon as I answer it. So it's really hard to parse. So take a look at that, and we're going to do it that way. Let me see here. Just gonna wait a couple more minutes for everyone to join, and then we're gonna get started. By the way, you guys are about to see the ugliest slides that you've ever seen in your lives.
Nice.
Because I put them together yesterday. They're all hand-drawn, so you're gonna see things like this, and I hope they make sense. I'm gonna try to help explain everything that's going on. But yeah, they're not gonna be pretty. I'm pretty sure nobody cares about pretty slides. I make them pretty for my class. I promise you that. So you're going to see a mix. Some slides are going to be super pretty. You're gonna like, oh, wow, I like that. And then I'm going to hit you with something like this, which is not pretty. Okay, cool. Let me go to the Q&A. All right, so I already see a test question. So I'm going to answer that by just clicking the button. Hopefully, yes. Will this recording be sent out afterwards? So the recording I'm going to post on my YouTube channel. Let me share. Well, actually, I'm going to post here in the chat. I'll write down the name of my YouTube channel, or rather the URL. So if you want that recording, you can just go there and you're going to get it. By the way, I scheduled this for an hour. I'll probably stay longer if you guys have to. It's fine. All right, so I posted in the chat the URL of my YouTube channel. I'll post the recording there. So yeah, let me share my screen and we can get started. By the way, a little bit of context here. The reason I'm doing this is twofold. So number one, I really like to talk. So let's just put it out there. So that's what I'm doing this. And number two, I'm preparing cohort 19 of my machine learning AI engineering cohort that starts in August. Some of you might be attending already because I posted this on my community. So some of you, I'm sure, go to my class. Actually, I see Leon, for example, that he just went to cohort 18. But because I'm preparing this for my next cohort, I have to take it for a spin. I have to put the content out there and determine what hits, what doesn't, what people understand, what doesn't resonate with people. This is my way of doing that. So I'm gonna do it with you. You're gonna be my guinea pigs. And when I take this content and put it as part of my cohort, it's going to be much better, right? So smart. So what I'm talking about today specifically is the model context protocol, MCP. Everyone wants to know what MCP is. Everyone wants to be doing MCP stuff. So I'm going to start with a quote from Anthropic. For those of you who know nothing about MCP, well, Anthropic put this together. It was, I think, November 2024. It's not 6 months now, I think, 6-7 months now. And it's supposedly it's an open standard. It's when I say the word standard, it's loosely standard. At least it's a standard way to provide context to models and to allow models to communicate with the outside world. That's the whole idea. How can we get a model to talk to the world? So they started their presentation when they introduced this. They started the presentation by saying models are only as good as the context provided to them. And I have here an example. I'm starting with the ugly slides here. I want you to just all of us get on this idea that we want to build an agent. Let's imagine we want to build an agent that helps people with dinner reservations. Okay, this is something that we're definitely going to have at some point, right? The agent is going to be there, and I'm going to say, hey, I want to go to a sushi place with my wife tonight, and let the agent do the thing. That's it. Let the agent find the restaurant, decide whether I can afford it, pick up the time, pick a table that I really like, make sure my dietary restrictions are taken into account. So my agent is going to do all of that for me, okay? You guys can imagine that. Now, the easiest application that we can put together today, let's say we build this agent and the agent has access to an LLM, as you can see here. And the user, myself, I'm going to send a query to this agent, and the agent is going to use an LLM, and it's going to return a response back to me. So far, I think this looks good, but there is a problem with this, obviously. The problem with this is that we don't want our agent to rely on the training data of that model to do things, because that model doesn't know the new restaurant that was opened last week. The model does not know the change in opening time and closing times of the other restaurants. So we need to give this model context. And context, what I mean by context, is additional information that the model does not know about. So we might do something like this, right? So I'm introducing here this red square box, which is context. And that context could be things like the restaurants that are in my area. The model needs to understand that. Okay, what are the restaurants that are near where I am? So I can provide that information to the model so the model makes a better determination. The model would like to know my dietary restrictions, which it's definitely not data the model was trained on. The model might know where I live, like what is my location? How far away am I from the restaurants? That would be important information. Things like my favorite cuisine. Do I like Italian food? Do I like sushi? So in case I don't specify, the model can make a better decision, right? Or my drink of choice, and make sure the restaurant has that. All of that could be relevant context that we want to provide this model. So we can add this box and make our system a little bit more complex. But there is a problem with this. The problem with this is that so far this looks good, but the model is going to be limited to returning information. That's not what I want my agent to do. I don't want an agent that tells me, restaurant ABC looks good, just go and take, make a reservation. I don't want that. I want my model to make the reservation. Please, guys, everyone, can you make sure you're muted? Because I'm getting a lot of feedback, so I'm hearing myself. I don't know if there is a button here for me to mute everyone, but please just mute yourself so it's we can go forward. So I want my agent. No, there's still somebody that's not muted. Let me just fix that. Also, if any of you see somebody that's not muted, I think you have the power of muting everyone. So that way it's gonna be better. Because if I hear myself, it's just gonna be bad.
One.
Let me
Now,
try.
I get confused now. Then you have to cut it.
I think I fixed it. No? Okay. I think I fixed it. Please do not open your microphone. All right, so let's keep going. Sorry about that. So as I was saying, we want the agent to make changes in the world. We want the agent to communicate with other things and take action, not just give us information. That's what an LLM can do. We want the agent to take action. So we're gonna need to add a little bit more complexity to this. So now I added a couple of APIs. Let's imagine for a second that these APIs exist, okay? So my point here is not to talk about APIs, but let's imagine for 1 second that there is a booking API that somebody created, maybe OpenTable or Resi or The Fork in Spain. I think that's the name, which I have a beautiful anecdote with The Fork. I'm gonna tell the anecdote because what the heck no? So I'm in Spain, first time I'm there. A friend of mine sent me an invite, and the URL of the invite says The Fork, right? And I open it, and there is a picture of where the fork is and all of that. So me and my wife walk over and go to the address that my friend sent me, and there is a hotel there, but there is no The Fork restaurant. And I start talking to the person that, like, there is a person working at the hotel outside at the door, the doorman. And I ask him, hey, do you know where The Fork is? And he's like, I have no idea what that is. No, this is just a restaurant. I mean, this is a hotel. There is a restaurant inside, but the name is not The Fork. I'm like, I don't know, man. Look at the invitation that he sent me. And he's like, oh, yeah. He's inviting you to the restaurant that's inside the hotel. The Fork is the name of the application that you use to make reservations. Like, stupid me. Of course, that's what's going to happen. So, getting back on point, getting back on track, we want the agent to be able to communicate with external APIs and maybe, just maybe, do the booking for me. So imagine there is a booking API, The Fork, and there is a specific restaurants API that we can also talk to and make reservations. So ideally, we want our agent to not only use context that we added right here, but also communicate with the booking API to maybe ask the booking API, give me a list of restaurants that have these characteristics, or give me the list of restaurants that you support, and maybe communicate with one of those restaurants directly through their API and say, hey, check the hours that you're open, or maybe just make a reservation, book for this person, right? That will be ideal. That's what we want our agent to do. But there's one more thing. To build this agent, and anyone who's tried to build anything with LLMs, you guys know how difficult it is to fiddle with the prompt until you have the prompt just right to do what you want to do. So as part of this application, we are going to need a bunch of prompt templates that is going to help us do what we want to do. Interpret the context correctly, call the appropriate tools, do the work internally. Imagine something that we bake into our application that says, always suggests 2 or 3 restaurants before making a reservation. That would be part of a prompt. Or saying, after you make a booking, return all of the information of that reservation, right? Those will be examples of prompts. So we also need to inject or to have somewhere in this agent application access to those prompt templates. Do you guys see how complicated this is getting? This is tough. But here is the kicker. Now imagine we want to do this same thing with different restaurant APIs. So all of the custom integration that we created, maybe for the .fork API, we're going to have to do all of that custom integration for OpenTable, which is the app that here in the US we use all the time. I guess it's not only the US, I've used it outside as well, but OpenTable. Or maybe we have to repeat all of the custom integration that we did for that restaurant API, because that's only one restaurant. But what happens when there is another restaurant with a different API? We're going to have to do all of that custom glue. So that's what the Model Context Protocol is going to do for us. So the whole goal of the MCP is to standardize how an AI application, our agent, interacts with external tools and with context. That's the whole idea. How can we create a standard way to build something as complex as this without pulling our hair in the process? We want to create a way to do it one time. And therefore, the context that we saw right here, that becomes now resources. We're going to talk more about resources in the MCP world. But the resources, that's just context that you now have a standard way to provide to your agent. The access to external systems and APIs, that in the MCP world becomes tools. The prompt templates that we need to create to help our agent do what it needs to do, those are now going to become prompts. These three are the three primitives supported by MCP servers: resources, tools, and prompts. Okay, so now before MCP, before we ever had MCP a year ago, every time you wanted to connect an app or an agent, here I have app 1, app 2, app 3. Every time you wanted to connect an app with specific service, specific API, specific external tool, you had to build a custom integration. So we had an M times N problem. M agents that you're building or somebody else is building requires M times N number of API connections. So in this particular case, you will need 9 custom integrations. After MCP, now we have an N plus N connections. Why is that? Because once you make your application MCP compatible, if you have an agent, you're building an agent. Once that agent is MCP compatible, now you can connect to any server out there without having to write custom code. That's it. You build it once, you use it with every single server out there. So the problem now became N plus N, because for each app, you only need to build integration with MCP once. That's this line right here. Only once you build that integration with MCP. And every server or every API, every service provider needs to build an MCP server only once. And now that MCP server is immediately available for anyone to use. That is the big problem that MCP is solving here. Remember, guys, I know some of you are raising your hand. Let me just get through the presentation. I'm going to let you speak. You can add your questions in Q&A if you cannot wait. I'm going to get to everyone, I promise, okay? All right, so here is the architecture. Here is the architecture of the whole MCP thing, okay? So we have a host. That's if you go to the specification, that's the terminology that they use. The host, Jesus Christ, I need somebody to scratch my back here. I don't know what's going on. All right, so you have a host, and that host might be Claude, or it might be Cursor, might be Windsurf, Visual Studio Code, whatever app, or your agent, that's the host application. That's the app users interact with, okay? Then you have that server will spin up an MCP client for every single MCP server that you want to connect to. This is something that happens internally, like unless you are the one building the specification, the protocol, you're not gonna be dealing with this, okay? But internally, you need to know that that host is spinning up a client, an MCP client, for every single server that's connecting to. So let's imagine that this particular agent that I have here on my screen is connecting to GitHub and to Slack. So there is a GitHub MCP server right here, and there is a Slack MCP server right here. So there are gonna be two clients inside the host that are taking care of that communication. The client is the one making calls to the MCP server, communicating with it, leading with authorization, doing all of that good stuff, okay? The GitHub MCP server and the Slack server, they might be just communicating with the GitHub API, whatever, that's fine, who cares? You can also have MCP servers that are local, that are running on your computer. So the agent is communicating with a server that's running on your computer. And that could be, for example, a file system MCP server that will allow you to, I don't know, maybe create files, list directories, or delete files or whatever, okay? And that will be running on your local machine. This will be the very high level MCP architecture. See, this is a pretty slide. This is a pretty slide. And the reason is because I already created this slide before. I taught this slide in Cohort 18. Okay, this is also a pretty slide. You have to give me that. Now let's get back into the ugly slides. This is just to finalize my slides here. I want to show you how the process works so you understand better how things happen behind the scenes. Okay, so I don't know if the font, this is my handwriting, is too small here, but I have an agent. And I want to, for the first time, I start this agent. The agent starts, I load the application, agent starts running. The agent is going to talk to the MCP client and say, hey, I know that I have a server because I have specification here that I should be able to communicate with an MCP server. Let me spin up a client here and let's create a session, okay? So here, I don't know if you can read the handwriting, but it says, let's initialize an MCP client for the MCP server we have. Obviously, we specified the config file somewhere. We told that agent that that agent has access to the MCP server. Okay, so imagine that this MCP server is a server representing the booking API. Okay, it's an MCP server for booking restaurants. So the agent starts a client. The client is going to go to the server and it's going to ask the server, can you start a session? Okay. And this is important because connections to the MCP server, they're persistent. You can have memory on the MCP server and you can have a persistent session across multiple calls, which is cool because you can save that context, store it, bring it back later, etc. So anyway, the client asks the server, we want to start a session, and the server is going to say, sure, here are my capabilities. The server will send the client all of the tools and all of the resources that the server supports. And this is beautiful because, as you can imagine, this works very different than an API works. An API doesn't have this discoverability process. The MCP has it, where MCP communicates back to the client. These are all of the tools that you have access to. In this case, you can reserve a restaurant, you can check the time that a restaurant is open, or you can cancel a reservation. Those are the three tools you have access to. The server is also telling the client, by the way, I have two resources that you should be aware of. One is the list of restaurants. I have that TXT file. You can access it if you want to. And I also have the dietary restrictions here, whatever that is. That is information that the server is telling the client, I can do this for you. So far, before I go to the next slide, imagine if we make a change on the MCP server? If we change the MCP server, we don't have to touch the agent at all. We're building the agent. Somebody else is building the MCP server. They make a change on the MCP server. We don't care. But if we were using an API, all of you guys here, maybe 90% of you have built applications before using APIs. What happens? What happens when the API provider changes the API? I'll tell you what happens. You are fucked. That's what happens, because they are going to break your application. So we resorted to these, oh, let's create a new version of the API. Now it's API version 2, and you have to migrate to version 2 if you wanted to use the greatest, the latest and the greatest. Because if they change an existing API, they would be breaking everyone's applications. That's a little bit different here with MCP, because the agent does not hard code the tools that it will be using. The MCP server will announce those tools to the agent. So now the agent can make decisions on which of those tools to use. So I'm going to go back, because that was the initialization part. Now let's imagine that I ask, please make a reservation at a sushi place. That's the query that I sent my agent. Okay. Now my agent is going to say, okay, I'm going to ask the LLM. The agent is dumb. The agent is just a shell. It's a wrapper. So the agent is going to use the LLM and say, hey, this dude right here, he wants to make a reservation at a sushi place. I have access to these tools and these resources. How does the agent knows that it has access to all of that? Because it got that information when it initialized the server. Remember, when it initialized the server announced its capabilities. So now the agent knows it can do that stuff. The agent is going to pack all of that information and send it to the LLM and say, hey, just make a reservation. Here are the tools. Here are the resources that you have access to. The LLM is going to look at that and say, can you please send me back the resource that's called list of restaurants? That sounds kind of important. So the agent now is going to ask the MCP server, hey, I want to read that resource. Give it back to me. You mentioned you had it. Can you please give it back to me? And the server is going to say, sure, here is the contents of that file. Here you have the entire list of restaurants. So now that the agent has the entire list of restaurants, the agent is going to give it to the LLM and say, here is what you asked me. This is the entire list. And now the LLM is going to say, okay, I see what restaurants are here. I know which of these restaurants are sushi places. I'm just making stuff up. So please call the tool reserve. There is a tool called reserve, make a reservation. So call that tool and pass the following parameters to that tool. Okay. How does the LLM know which parameters to pass? Because that is part of the information that's shared. When the server announces the tools, the server will send the specification of that tool. Here are the parameters. Here is the meaning of each parameter, etc. So now the agent can just call the tool reserve and pass, I don't know, the name of the restaurant. We have a beautiful sushi place close by. It's called Echo, here where I live. Amazing food. It's going to call it with Echo, 8 p.m., and Santi is going to be the person who's going to be making that reservation, whatever parameters we need to share. This is sort of like a high level of how the process works. Notice how the LLM and the agent are now working together to make calls to an MCP server to decide what to do. Okay? All right, so just to move along 2 more slides, another beautiful slide here. This is sort of like a summary of what we saw about the primitives that the server supports. Okay, so here you have the tools, here you have the resources, and here you have prompts. One thing that I want to mention about these 3 things. Tools, they are model controlled. And what that means is that models, the LLM decides when, how to muting. Just muted you. All right, so That's what I mean when I say tools are model controlled. Okay. The LLM is the one deciding when to call a tool. Resources, they are application controlled. Okay. The application decides what to do with those resources. The MCP server will expose that data to the application. The application decides how to use it. Is it going to pass it to every call to the LLM? They can do that. Or is it going to wait for the LLM to ask for a resource? That also works. It's the application making a decision. And prompts are user controlled, meaning the server will expose the prompts to the application, and the user of the application will decide how to use those prompts. Okay. So imagine, by the way, prompts are not well supported right now by any tools, but the whole idea with prompts is that the tool that you're using, let's say it's Claude Desktop, can show you a list of potential things that you could perform, and you could select the one that you can perform, and that will be interpolated by the application. Interpolated meaning, imagine it's going to be a prompt template. So the application will replace any blanks with the proper information and will execute that prompt. So they're going to be very helpful as soon as tools start integrating them. Okay. So we've talked about this. This is the other slide that I wanted to show you. And as of a few days ago, this slide is outdated because there is a new primitives that clients support. Here's the thing, and not a lot of people are talking about this. MCP servers can also talk to clients. This is like your API talking to the client application, huh? That's pretty cool. So here, communication is bi-directional. The client can talk to the server. That's the model that we're used to. But the server can also talk to the client. And specifically, there are 3 primitives. And the third one is not part of this because the third one is still in draft mode. It's not part of the official specification yet. It's in draft mode. It will be out in the next version of the specification. I'm going to talk about that for a second because it's really cool. But about these 2 here, the most cool one, the awesome one is sampling. Because sampling allows the server to ask the client to run an LLM query for them. So imagine that we built a server that, I don't know, the server is this booking API, okay, the booking API. And let's say that the booking API has a function, a tool that says write a review, okay? And the function expects the user, myself, to send a review, and the agent will do that for me, okay? Will post that review for me. But let's imagine that that agent or that tool, the MCP server, wants to correct my grammar before posting my review. So I'm going to send my review. The agent will talk to the MCP server. Hey, post this review for this restaurant. The MCP server needs to check the grammar, fix it, and then post it. How do we make that happen? Well, the MCP server might connect to OpenAI API and ask, hey, given this review, fix the grammar, send it back to me, something like that. But why have that server connecting to an external API when we know that that server is being used in a context where there is access to LLMs? So instead of having another connection that goes out to an external API, let's just ask the LLM that's driving this communication, that's part of the agent. Let's ask that LLM, can you please run this query for me? That is what sampling is about. So again, I have not knowledge of any clients of any hosts or applications that support sampling yet, but it's part of the specification. And it's pretty dope because now that server can ask my agent, hey, listen, in order for me to post this review, please use your LLM and run this prompt. Okay. And now the agent can just use my LLM, run the prompt, fix the grammar, send it back to the server, and now the server will host it. That is awesome. Final, routes is access to local data. So as you can imagine, servers might be running locally. So a server might expose local files to the MCP client. Sorry, the MCP client might expose local files to the MCP server, so the server can use those files to do stuff. Like, imagine that we want to review a coding file. You don't have to attach it. So you can basically tell the server, just use, this is where the root that you have access to, just grab the file from there. That's what routes is about. The final primitive that is not here on the screen is called elicitation. So this is for the server to ask the client for information. So imagine that we, I don't know, we say we have an agent that one of the things that the agent can do is send an email. And we tell the agent, please send an email to John Doe about yada, yada, yada. The server might not know where we want to send that email from. So the server might elicit the client and say, hey, can you please ask the user for his email address? And now the client will present to me, the user, a form asking for my email address. And I enter my email address, and that information will get back to the server, and the server will do its job. So immediately you should be thinking about how many things we can use with elicitation, because servers will need our data in order to do stuff. And that is a cool way for the server to communicate with the host application that they should ask for something. So final slide that I have here, MCP makes everyone's lives better. Number one, application developers, anyone who's building agents and applications. Now you can connect to any MCP server without having to implement or reinvent the wheel every single time. If you want to connect to GitHub, if you want to connect to Slack, if you want to connect to, I don't know, another API MCP server that John Doe created, you don't care about their interface and how they implemented things. You only have to build support for MCP once, and any server now you have access to. Pretty powerful. For the people who are building these tools, for the people who are building APIs, now you can get massive adoption because you build your MCP server once and everyone in the world can use it. And obviously for end customers, end users, because that's all of us, we're gonna see a massive jump in the quality of these applications. Now these applications can do a lot more than they were able to do before. This is, I think this is my last slide. It is. So I'm gonna go to the questions and answers. I'm gonna go through that, and then you're gonna raise your hand, and I'm gonna ask your name, and we're gonna do this thing. All right, let me go to the Q&A here. Okay, not that many. So let's see. Test question. I thought that I answered that already. Will this recording be sent out? Yes, this recording will be on YouTube. Does the agent find the API, or is the API connected before a user? Oh, by the way, I can also show you a demo if you guys want. Tell me in the chat window if you want me to show you like a quick demo of how to build this or whatnot. So, well, I don't have to look at the chat window. All right, so I'm gonna show you the demo. Let me answer 3 more questions, and then I'm gonna go to, don't say anymore. My screen is getting, it's fine. I'm gonna show the demo. All right, so let me see. Does the agent find the API, or is the API connected before a user queries? Is the context given in the user prompt, or is this a unique personal agent with the context baked in? So the second question is very good, and I know why you're asking it. Is because my example is kind of like, could be both ways. For the first question, okay, so the agent is not necessarily going to find the API. You could have an agent that's just connecting to something and doing discoverability, but that's not the goal. You will register your MCP servers with the agent beforehand. You will tell the agent, you have access to this and this and this MCP server. That's the way it works. And now the agent, when the agent starts, is going to start a session with each one of those MCP servers. Remember, it's going to create a client. Each server will announce themselves. It's going to say, hey, here I am. I have a session with you. This is everything that I support. And from there on out, you start working. So there is no discoverability from that point of view of let me just go out there in the world and find any agents that I can use to do, or any servers that I can use to do this. That's not the way it works. Is the context given in the user prompt, or is this a unique personal agent with a context baked in? The answer is that it could be both. You could be providing context to an agent, but the agent might also have context. So if it's a unique agent, something like dietary restrictions, I don't need to provide them in my context every single time, right? I don't have to do that. I can bake that in. I can have a server that worries about me, that always returns back my dietary restrictions. And that server would be just for me. But some of the context might be coming from the user prompt. Like, for example, when do I want to go eat? And at what time do I want to go eat? And how many people are going to go with me? That is context that every time will be different, but I might decide to bake in my dietary restrictions as permanent context, things that don't change that much. All right, one more question before I go to the demo, and then I'm gonna come back to the questions here. And by the way, if you go to the Q&A and you see the questions, you can thumbs up the question that you want me to make sure I answer. So those are gonna go to the top. I don't know why so many people thumb up the test question, but I guess that was important. So just thumb up if you see a question you want me to answer. That'll help. If MCP gets more popular, almost every company, regardless of their AI integration, would benefit from it as long as their services are callable by API. Is my understanding correct? I think so. Yeah, every company will benefit from having MCP for sure. Yes. All right, so let me show an example here. Let's see how we can do this. I'm gonna have to stop sharing. And this is gonna be a very, very simple example that I built for a presentation that I gave yesterday. But I guess we can do it today too. All right, so, okay. So this is what you're looking at right now is Postman. And if you guys did not know, it's because it's very recent, but Postman now has support for MCP. That means that you can debug your MCP servers using Postman, okay? So just give it a try, pretty cool. I'm gonna open here my MCP server.js file here. There is a lot of code here, but fret not, it's not that bad. We're only going to focus right here, which is what I care about, which is going to be, let me see, transform tools, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, this portion here is the one that I'm going to talk about. So what happened here? So I went to Postman MCP. So just type that. And there is a link that you're going to get that's called generate an MCP server out of an API. So I'm not signing, I'm not going to do it, but I'm going to just cut to the chase. You can basically find an API that's part of Postman here and select a few of the functions that API offers, and then click on this generate button, and Postman will create an MCP server automatically for you. Okay, that is what you can do with this. So you can take any API and create an MCP server for it automatically. That saves a ton of time. Now, let me warn you, that's awesome to start. That's awesome to experiment. It might even be all you need. But MCP servers and APIs are two different things. APIs are very good at low-level operations to do certain things. APIs were created for developers to call, developers that can reason, that can put 2 plus 2 together can decide which call to make first, which call to make second. They know how to do that. MCP servers are very, very different. Their audience is not people. Their audience is large language models. MCP servers are better at offering tasks, resolutions. Okay? Not low-level operations. So the reason I mention this is because yes, a tool like Postman MCP, auto-generating MCP server is great because it's going to get you started, but it's only doing a proxy MCP. So basically creating an MCP server that's handling over what you give it to an API, getting the response back, sending it back to the user. It's not taking advantage of a new, I'm going to call it language here, which is how do we talk to LLMs? That's the whole goal of MCP. So you're missing out. If you're doing that, you're just missing out, okay? But it's great for getting started. So rant aside, I took this MCP Postman thingy. I looked for the Google API, the Maps API, and there is, in the Maps API, there is a function that's called getRoute. Get it here, getRoute. Actually, I have here, this is the actual API. So this is me calling this API, okay? So if I call this API here, let me see, I don't even know if this is gonna work. Yeah, it worked. So if I'm calling this API here, I don't want to go, yeah, let me see the body. Okay, so you can see in the body of me calling this API, I'm passing the origin, and the origin is this format. That's the format requested by the API. I have to pass, so this is an apartment in Madrid, and this is a place also in Madrid, Plaza Mayor. So I'm asking the API, can you give me driving directions or walking directions from this origin to this destination? Okay, so this is just the API that we know of. So the MCP server is based on that API. So it has a tool, obviously, and that tool is called getRoute. Okay, and getRoute expects an origin and expects a destination. Okay, so here you can see how I'm connecting to that MCP server. I'm connecting here Postman to that MCP server. It's a TypeScript application, so it's running using Node. This is the path of Node in my computer, and this is the location in my computer where the server is. And again, this is the server that I downloaded that was auto-generated. I made several changes to that server. I will explain why, but I started it by auto-generating it, okay? So notice that the protocol is standard input-output. There are two ways to connect to an MCP server. Number one is over HTTP. So if the MCP server is published online somewhere, I can use HTTP to connect to it, okay? If the MCP server is running locally on my computer, I can just use standard input-output. In this case, this MCP server is running on my computer. So I'm going to use standard input-output to connect. STDIO, whatever you call that. So now I can click connect. And when I click connect, what's going to happen behind the scenes is that Postman is going to just call this thingy here. It's just going to connect to it. So I'm going to do connect. And as you can see, now it's connected. You can see here it says connected. And what's happening is that my MCP server.js is running in the background here. Okay, so now I can type here 2 locations and get the thingy to route. So I'm going to say from Wellington, Florida, that's where I live, to Rosemary Square, West Palm Beach. Okay, so this is, I'm preparing to call this MCP server tool. I'm going to run it. And if this worked, I can go and see the response that I got back. So you can see I connected, I made a tool call, and I got a response back. This is the contents of that response. We can do preview. And you can see there are 12 steps. So I'm going to depart, head south towards Wellington Trace, blah, 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 blah. All the driving directions. So these driving directions are being returned by my MCP server, which in turn is calling the API. Now, let's take a look at the code really quick, and then I'm going to show you how to connect these to an LLM, okay? So if I go to the code, there is a lot of plumbing here that Postman is creating just to make this call. I promise if you start, there is a good reason Postman is doing this. Remember, they're auto-generating this. If you start from scratch, it's way simpler than this. But what matters here is we're calling the tool. I'm getting the raw result back. And then here specifically, I made these changes here. I'm only getting a portion of the data that's coming back from the API. Turns out Google Maps API is very verbose. They return something called the polygons for every route. It's just a nightmare to deal with those polygons. It's just too much information. I don't want to pass all of that to the context of an LLM. So I can basically parse the results and only get the data that I need. And that is the data that I'm going to be sending back as my MCP server is going to be sending back to the LLM. Okay. So those were the modifications that I made to the server. Again, great to have it auto-generated just to get started. Okay. Now let's connect this to an LLM, shall we? So if we go to Claude Desktop supports MCP. So if you go to settings in Claude Desktop, you should see a developer section. By the way, I don't pay for Claude here, so you can do this even if it's free. I'm not paying for this. So you go to the developer section, and here you can see my Google Maps routes MCP server. The way you configure that is very simple. You click on edit, and it will point you to a config file. I'm going to open that config file here, make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. So in that config file, I added this portion here. So any name you want, that's the name of your MCP server, the command that it has to run, that's node, and the arguments that it has to pass. Here are the arguments. That's it. So now Claude knows about my MCP server. So if I ask a question to Claude, Claude might decide to use the get routes. It's up to Claude to do that, but if it sees that my MCP server is a good tool to solve a problem, Claude might use my MCP server. So let's give it a try. I'm going to ask it, I want the route between Miami and New York. So supposedly by me asking, hey, can you get me a route? Claude will look at my MCP and will try to get them from the MCP instead of trying to use its training data, which is what we want to avoid. We want it to use the MCP. Let's do something LLM-wise here. I'm going to say, write the driving directions in a list and speak like a pirate. I don't know. Whatever, guys. I just wanted to Claude to inject something here that's fun. All right, so look at this. I'll get you the route from Miami to New York, matey. And then notice how it called get route here. So Claude decided that the best way to do that was to actually call my tool. So it called my tool, it passed Miami FL. Look, Miami, I just specified Miami. Claude knows that this is from Florida, so it did that. Destination, New York, New York. That's awesome. It got the response with the starting location, blah, blah, blah. And now is giving me the driving directions, pirate style. And hoist the express lane colors. Jesus Christ, is so that joke type. There you go. It used my, now I can ask Claude something else. It's not going to use that. how much is 2 plus 3? It's not going to use get routes to do that. That's not a good fit, right? So it's just Claude is working the way it was, but now has the added capability of knowing how to find driving directions to your place. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to get back to the questions. Let's do this. I'm going to answer 3 Q&As, and I'm going to let one of you talk and do that live. So trying to get through as many of you as possible. Okay, so let's go back to the Q&A. Let me see if Slack or any other service do not have an MCP server implemented. Can the client implement it for their use case, or should their MCP be available? Yes, you can implement your own MCP server to connect to Slack API or to Stripe API. In fact, you might have to do that even if Stripe provides their MCP server. Maybe Stripe provides an MCP server with functionality that you do not need, and you want to create your own MCP server with different functionality, with a task that Stripe is not considering. I think that you're going to see all of these big API vendors provide standard API MCP servers that are general, meaning everyone could use them to accomplish things. But you're going to see people who want to use Stripe as part of their application come up with their own MCP servers that are more focused. Here is the beauty of all of this. I did not mention this in my presentation. MCP allows for composability. What that means is that I can connect to an MCP server that is at the same time an MCP client to another MCP server. So that means that Stripe might provide their MCP server with general functionality, and I can create one MCP server with more focused functionality that uses Stripe's official MCP server. So you can compose an application just doing that, which is going to be awesome. All right, so let me get to the second one regarding upgrading the MCP server and not needing to update the MCP client. Is it then a good practice to have the MCP client regularly query the MCP server for the available tools? I do not know if that is already baked into the application. I think into the specification. I think the way it's supposed to work, but again, I don't think this is the way like something like Cursor is working today, okay? But the specification says that anytime the MCP server changes, they should call the client and say, request a refresh. And I'm going to, I don't want to lie to you, so I'm going to open the specification and we can see it right now to make sure that's the case, because I think that's kind of important. So let's see, specification, where do we go? Tools, what is the tool? Or maybe base protocol, lifecycle, maybe? Let's see. Request, response, shutdown, disconnect. Let's see, where do we see that? Messages. Nah, not messages. Server features, let's go to tools and let's see if they include that here. All right, so look at this. So in this message flow, it might be too small, but in this message flow here, you can see how the server is sending a request to the client, you know, a message to the client saying, hey, my tools changed. And then the client is saying, okay, so can you please list the new tools? And then the server is going to tell the client, yeah, here are the updated tools. So this is the way it's supposed to work. Okay, during discovery, the client will ask for the list of tools. When there is an update, the server will tell the client something changed. So the client requests that list again. However, the last time I checked, using Cursor, which supports MCP, if you added something new to the MCP server, sometimes you have to close the whole Cursor. I imagine it's because this might not be working. I might be wrong. That's what I have in mind, that maybe they haven't added support for this yet, but this is the way it's supposed to work. All right, so That was the second question. Let's get to the third question, and then we go to the hands up. Okay, regarding the API changing versions and the nightmare that it is for consumers, wouldn't the same happen if the MCP owners change the MCP server to a new version with a different resource tools names and or templates? It wouldn't. And the reason it would not happen is because the LLM will receive an updated list. There is nothing hard-coded to that MCP server. Nothing. When you're building your agent, you're building your AI-based application, you are not specifying which tools to call. You're not doing that. If you were connecting to APIs, you would be connecting directly to an API. You would be saying, call the API such and such. When you're building an AI application and relying on MCP servers, you are not doing that. You are allowing the LLM to decide which tools to use. That's why if those tools change, nobody cares. The LLM will pick the new version of the tool. If the new version is the one that's available, the LLM will just start calling that new version. Okay. All right. So let me select, let me see. Bostall. I suck with names, so I'm sorry. What's up? You can speak now.
I already posted it in the chat. I just recommended a very nice MCP.
Okay.
It's an MCP that scraped the entire web, basically.
Okay. Oscar Llerena.
Hello, thanks for the opportunity. So maybe this question is for to finish the session, but I want to ask, we have seen that abstraction has been taken out from the users, right? So how far or close do you think we are into get applications that build the whole architecture of MCP agents and you know, the blocks by a simple prompt? I mean, we are happy to learn this, I think, but I guess at some point this is going to be abstracted from us too, don't you think? Thank you.
Well, so yes, so that it is a big question. So basically, if I understand you correctly, you're saying, why are these people wasting their time trying to build MCPs when supposedly the super coder is around the corner and it's going to render all of us obsolete anyway, and nobody will be building MCPs? Is that the point of your question?
Yeah, I wouldn't say wasting our time because it is productive, okay? But at some point, I think abstraction is going to take out this, you know, the design of the whole MCP blocks structure. I think so.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure about that.
So here's what I think about it, okay? And I'm nobody, I might be completely wrong. But it's funny to me that the same people who are telling you that it's about a year until nobody has to code anymore. And by the way, parentheses, it's been about a year for 3 years now, but it's about a year. The same people are still hiring hundreds of software engineers. Why? The same people are literally building things like MCP that require developers to build, people to make abstractions, etc. Don't you see something weird here? Why would they be focusing on this when this is peanuts compared to the super agent that is going to render us obsolete? So anyway, I don't want to be cynical. I'm biased. I do this for a living. So obviously a super agent that does everything that I do better and faster and cheaper is going to send me to retirement because I'm not working for anybody again, ever again. So I'm going to have to retire. I don't know, maybe, I don't know, do some onions or whatever. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. My point is, I think MCP is here to stay. I think we're very far away from a future where nobody will need to code. I do think that these models are every single day taking a little bit more from the bottom of the pile. So if you imagine like people being a pyramid, right? You get here on top like this is a horrible pyramid. I'm sorry. So you get here on top, the top whatever percent, top 10% of developers, and at the bottom you get all of the junior developers, people who are starting out, etc. Obviously, these models are eating from the bottom up. They are making people at the bottom irrelevant. These people have two choices: either they upskill and go up towards the the higher of this pyramid, or they get replaced. The question is whether these models will ever be good enough to replace everyone in this pyramid. I think they will be. I do not think I'm going to see that. That's my opinion. I might be completely wrong. Here is the beautiful thing about this. It's like, I don't care who you are. You're just speculating, just like I am. The people who are building these models, hiring hundreds of software engineers, they're telling me something way more important than what they're telling the press, because their compensation depends on people like us believing that it's over. That's how they make more money. That's how they raise more capital. So of course they're going to say that. But in the background, they keep hiring us to do the job. So anyway, I think MCP is here to stay for a long time. Coding is here to stay for a long time. Building systems that work is still very, very complex. All right, so let me see. Cole, Macintosh.
Hey, how's it going?
And now you're gonna tell me.
I just had a question, just kind of to get your perspective on like how you think about tool building in MCP. Do you think more in a meta sense, where you give it the tools to kind of explore the system and then execute commands, or do you build more specific tooling for the agents?
Yeah, that is great. You did not hear my joke. I was gonna say, I hope you do not use Windows. You're a Mac user.
Definitely don't.
Sorry, that wasn't that joke. So it's a great question, and the answer is that we're still figuring out. I think, from my point of view, that it's very important for us to think who the audience is to NCP servers, and the audience has very, very different characteristics than software developers. We've been building and learning how to build APIs for decades now, right? And not even agrees on what is the best way of building an API. Some people go to very, very low-level operations. Some people build APIs that are more like task-oriented, like send an invoice. If you go to Stripe API, for example, you don't create an invoice. That's not a thing. You have to create a line item, and you have to create an invoice and relate them with the line item, and you have to set a price for another, like a product. It's just so low level, and it makes sense that it's that way. LLMs are not great with that, and they're not going to interact well with that. So LLMs are going to be better at task. I want to send an invoice to such and such person, and here is all of the data, and the LLM and MC, ideally, a tool will now compose all of those low-level calls behind the scenes to accomplish that task. Is that a pattern that we're going to have to start, or I mean, do we have to start now thinking and giving talks on what the best way of building tools is? I think so. We're going to have to learn, but I like to think more in those terms, task-oriented instead of low-level operation-oriented. Does that make sense?
Totally, yeah. Thank you.
All right, so let me get back here to the Q&A really quick. How do you approach tool design within your MCP server? Is this the same question? Do you build specific? Yeah, that was your question. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you can skip it. So, thank you.
Yeah. For the sampling mechanism that is a future capability in MCP, can the MCP server know which LLM is used in the client? That's a great first part of the question. So first of all, it's not a future capability. It's part of the spec today. However, hosts are slow at implementing this. So everyone started by implementing tool support. Obviously, tool support is the most interesting part. I do not know of any client that supports sampling yet. I imagine that will be coming down the pipeline, but it's part of the spec yet. So no, the server will not know which LLMs are supported. The server, however, can ask for its preferences. So part of the spec, as part of the spec, you can ask, you can tell the client, I want you to run this prompt. Please use GPT-4o if you can. If not, fall back to O3 mini. If not, do whatever, right? So something like that. That's the way it's going to work, but the server will not have any knowledge of which LLMs are supported. Asking because in your example of restaurant review, how can the server ensure the client's LLM is capable enough to perform the request it is sending it? If you, the answer is you don't know. I don't think there is anything in the spec that will give you that information, but we do not need to speculate, because then I speculate and somebody's going to say, duh, you were wrong. And I don't like that. So let's go to sampling. Let's see. Okay, so the client will announce it has the ability to sample. Here are the protocol message. What is the capital of France? Okay, model preferences. So you can see here that the server, this is a message sent by the server to the client. So the server is asking the client, run this query, what is the capital of France? And use Claude 3's Sonnet if you have access to it. Intelligence priority 0.8, no idea what that is. We're going to have to read about it. Speed priority 0.5. And this is the system prompt. And the response is the capital of France is Paris, and it was run by this model here, and that's it. Let me see. Sampling, create message, server to client, sampling, create message. User approves that request, yada, yada, data types, model preferences. Let me read here. Model selection in MCP requires careful abstraction since servers and clients may use different AI providers with distinct model offerings. That is your point. A server cannot simply request a specific model by name, since the client might not have access to that exact model or may prefer to use a different provider's equivalent model. To solve this, MCP implements a preference system that combines abstract capability priorities with optional model hints. So you can say cost priority, speed priority, that's what those meant, intelligence priority. So basically through these three, you will hint to the client which model to use. Model hints. While priorities help select models based on characteristics, hints allow servers to suggest specific models or model families. Hints are treated as substrings that can match model names flexibly. Right, so you say Claude 3 Sonnet, and this will match any 3.5, 3.7, or whatever. Let me see, the client process, the preference. What I do not know is there is nothing here that speaks to that. I do not know what happens if the client uses a dumb model and returns an answer. Like, how do you know, how does the server know it should use that answer or not? I do not have an answer for that question. I'll have to research to see if they've thought about that. Yeah, so I don't know the answer to that question. Okay, let me keep going down. One more, and then I'm going to ask people with their hands up. Trevor asks, how does the security work for access to the MCP server? For example, I might want only certain privileged users to access specific data. I'm glad you asked. So MCP now supports, since the latest official specification, they now support authorization using OAuth 2.1. So what that means is that now you can expose, you can have an MCP server act as an MCP resource server and expose tools that you need privilege to connect to. So now MCP clients have to build an authentication workflow. So at a very high level, user asks a question, client connects to MCP server, asks to run a tool returns 401 back, you're unauthorized. MCP client now goes to the resource, the authorization server, because the MCP server will communicate back how to authenticate the user. MCP now goes to authorization server and says, let's just authenticate this client. Third-party service does its thing. User has to enter password on, I don't know, Google's authentication service, whatever that is. You will enter the password. Token will be interchanged in the background. The specification explains exactly where the token goes, what is going to be generated. And now, at the end of all of this process, now the client has an access token that will send to the server, and we'll use that token to communicate with the tools in the server. So that's the way authorization works. Again, this is very new since March of this year. So it's been 3 months, not even, that this came out. We need to wait for the actual applications to implement this flow, okay? And this is a flow where users will be authenticating themselves. Okay, let me see the next one. No, actually, Kishore Kumar Sridhar. That's it. I need to pronounce my R's a little bit better when I'm pronouncing.
Yeah, you said it. You said it. You pronounced it just right, Santiago. Thank you very much for this session. And this question that I have is not really related to MCPs. I'm just trying to get a little perspective on something that I have. So I work as an entry-level data scientist for the past 2 years. I don't enjoy coding that much, but I still learned all the NumPy, Pandas, Matplotlib, Seaborn, scikit-learn, all of that. And I'm able to understand the code and all of that and build models based on the data sets that I have. But now when I look to switch jobs, all the job descriptions have been drastically different from what they were 2 years back. Now, they don't just look for data scientists who are only into just building models, because even the models that I'm building, the entry-level data scientist, I can just describe it in ChatGPT, and it literally gives me the entire random forest score or XGBoost score, and it works pretty well for like 80% of the time. And all the job descriptions now ask for like MCPs and model deployment, all of that, which I don't have any experiences, number one. And also, I don't enjoy that level of coding. But I feel like I'm in a situation where I don't have a choice but to learn all of this MCP and all of that. Even whatever you just showed me, to me, from my personal experience and my interest, it feels a lot more coding that I want to do. But I feel like I don't have a choice. And I don't know if anyone else feels this way as being just a data scientist. I like data science, but I don't like this level of coding. So I just want to know if this is how data scientist jobs are going to be, because I feel like it's really merged very well with ML engineer jobs. So I just want to know how a data scientist like me or someone else has to go through this transition. I'm literally considering if I should even do data science because I don't enjoy that much coding. So I just want to know your perspective on this.
Yeah, 100%. Number one, thank you for the question. Number two, I have to grapple with this question all the time. I teach a class. Most of the students are like you. Not that they don't like to code, but definitely a lot of data scientists, a lot of people who are studying now and whatnot, and everyone is trying to answer the same question. They are asking more out of us. Like before, when I started, you could have made a career just by doing a little thing. Just you get good at that little thing and you were settled. Now you're going to see more and more that companies are only want to hire people who are not necessarily experts in one thing, but they are T-shaped and they can work all across the spectrum. Not just the person who analyzes a data set and uses a few tools just to gather information. They're going to want that person to also build the model, to build an entire pipeline, to evaluate that model, to monitor that model, to put it in production, to register that model, to take care of scaling that model. They're going to want that person to do a lot more. Because let me put it this way, and I'm not gonna go too deep into this. We can talk more about that later if you want to, after a lot more people ask about MCP. But let me put it this way. There is a big thing that's happening, which is these models are getting good at doing our jobs. I don't think anybody can say that's not true. These models are doing a lot of the stuff that we used to get paid to do. How do you protect against these models? Think about that. The answer is not hard. If you're a data scientist, how do you protect against these models? One morning, you're realizing that these models can do a better job than you can with, on your job. I think the answer is you need to keep upskilling. You need to make it hard for these models to catch you on what you're doing. You need to keep extending your area of influence. That is my opinion. That is what I'm trying to do, what I would recommend people to do. If that means learning to code and maybe breaching out of your comfort zone of analyzing data sets, I'm just saying analyzing data sets as a single thing. I know you do more than that. But if that means taking out of that, that's what you should do. Or you might find yourself in a very uncomfortable situation. That's what I think. By the way, guys, everyone else, if you liked this session here, I teach a whole cohort, not just on MCP, but cohort 19 is about agents, about rack systems, about building systems that work. The real ones, not the freaking demos that you see or what the books tell you that you should do. Talk the demos. We talk about real applications, problems that I have a bunch of anecdotes of stupid shit that I've done that did not work and why it did not work. That is what my cohort is about. Check it out. It's ml.school. That's it. You can join now, and you're going to get a seat on August for the cohort. So anyway, all of that being said, let me go to Philip. What's up, man?
Hey, Santiago, thank you for all your great insights. I love following you on X. It's awesome. My question for you is MCP related. So we have these hosts. Claude Desktop is what you use today. When they have choices because the config files on who to route to, do you have any idea how that works? How do we explain that to other people?
When they have to, do you mean how do they decide which tool to pick? When they're
which MCP server to connect to get the job done. And possibly there are cases where they could have two mapping providers. For your example, right? Apple and Google, how are they going to route? How does that work?
So that second question, we do not know. So that's one of the big problems with MCP right now, is that the more tools you use, like we're imagining this amazing world where an LLM has access to all of the tools in the world to do everything. That is going to be a nightmare, because right now, the more tools you add, the more difficult it gets for the LLM to pick the right tool. So one of the problems we have today is that if there are two tools that are very similar, the description is very similar, the LLM is not going to know which one to pick. It's just going to pick one. How does it decide which one to pick? Is a mystery for LLMs, right? Sometimes it's going to pick one, sometimes might pick the other one. It's non-deterministic, right? It's probabilistic. How can you combat this? How can you make this better? Is through the description. Like a big part of the MCP specification is describing every tool in LLM language, like, which is very different, by the way, of how most people describe APIs. When you're writing the documentation of an API, if you're writing the documentation of an API, big if, many companies don't even have documentation for their APIs. You're writing for developers. Here, you're writing for LLMs. So you cannot just say, we're doing this and see here in this link how to do something else. No, that flies on an API. That doesn't work on an MCP server, because the LLM is not going to open that URL and read what you mean. That's for people to do. So the more specific, the better is your prompt, basically, your description of the tool. The more hints you're going to give to that LLM of when exactly to use your tool. But again, if you're using Apple and Google, the LLM will probabilistically pick one of those. They're very similar, and will return directions from one of those. Now, in the other hand, if they're truly similar, does it even matter that it's using one or the other? I don't know, probably not. But if they're doing something different in the world, yeah, that's one of the big problems that we have right now.
Okay, quick follow-up. So is that like SEO for MCP, where the prompts help guide the host on how to route?
That is a very good analogy. I've never heard it before. I guess yes. So yeah, it's the prompt is the one. And when I say the prompt is the description of the tool and the parameters of the tool. That is the hint. That is the information that will be shared with the LLM. Okay. So when the MCP server says, here are my tools, is sending the name of the tool, which is just the name of the function that you create, get routes, the description of the tool, and the parameters with the description of all of those parameters. All of that information gets sent to the LLM. The better is that description, the easier it is for the LLM to properly understand when to use your tool, right? Like, for example, if I have a calculator MCP and I have a function that's called add, A-D, and it receives 2 numbers, and it, the description says adds, and there is another function that says calculator add, that's the name of the function, receives 2 numbers and adds them together, blah, 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 better description. The LLM will tend to pick the one that's clearly the one that's going to be adding 2 numbers, not the first one, which is barely says what it needs to do. Make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
All right, so let me get here really quick. How does it work if the MCP server requires a user to access their account? I already explained that. I do not have a demo of how to do it. There are, by the way, the specification is very, very recent. I know some people have done demos. There is specifically one demo that I saw with WorkOS. If you don't know WorkOS, WorkOS does authentication. There is a demo where they use Cloudflare for an agent, and they do authentication with WorkOS. But specification is very, very recent. So we're going to see more clients support the Auth2 protocol going forward. Can you provide a code example of an MCP implementation and more in practice use of MCP? I don't have one to share right now, but if you Google it, you're going to get plenty of them. When the MCP server, when the MCP specification was released by Anthropic, they released a whole GitHub repo with a list of MCP servers, and the code of all of those, I think, is open, so you can see the code of all of those MCP servers. So I promise you are not going to have any trouble finding an MCP server in Python or TypeScript, finding the code. How does the host decide to route to an MCP server if there are multiple connected MCP servers? So the host does not make that decision. I think that was your question, Philip. We already answered that, but just to, like, the naming here matters. The decision is made by the LLM. The LLM decides when to route, when to call a tool, okay, not the host. The host tells the LLM, I have all of these tools. What do you want me to do? The LLM says, call tool A. And then the host, through the MCP client, will call tool A. That's the way it works. Okay, let me see. Oscar, what's up?
Oh, I'm sorry, I left my hand up. I already did
okay.
the question. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. What is the library you're using to run the agent locally? Do you also run the MCP client in the same machine? So let me show you. Okay, so let me show you a Python one, because the one that I show you was the one that's auto-generated. I don't want to show you too much code that's auto-generated, because I do not understand code that somebody else wrote. And by somebody else, I mean a process that wrote it. So I'm going to show you instead something else. Okay, so let's see, maybe this. I'm going to make it bigger. And I'm going to go, where do I go? What do I want to do? Scripts, maybe? Okay. So this is just like a small example of an MCP server. This is the library that I'm using. I hope you guys are seeing my screen. This is the library that I'm using for this MCP server. It's the fast MCP. This is the standard library that they recommend you use for Python. And this is my MCP server here. So look at this. MCP tool, you call it, it's called is endpoint running. That's the function that tool, the way I'm defining the tool. And the documentation is check if its SageMaker endpoint is currently running. The arguments, it passes an endpoint, the name of the SageMaker endpoint to check, and it returns a Boolean value true if the endpoint is in service, false otherwise. Notice that I'm being very verbose here because I want the LLM to get all of this information. I'm talking to an LLM, not to a person. So the function internally, it uses the Boto3 library to connect to SageMaker, describes the name of the endpoint, so it gets that response, and then it checks whether the status of that endpoint is in service, and then it returns true in this case, or if there is an exception, it's going to return false. So that's that tool. There is another tool. I mean, there are a bunch of tools here, but let me explain something and then something else. How do I run this? You will see that I have this, which is a Docker that I use this Docker to run my MCP locally, so I don't execute the script directly. The reason is it's a little bit more complicated than I don't know if you guys care, but I run all of my code inside a Docker container. It's a dev container. Cursor, which is the IDE, is running on my computer, but the code of the MCP server is running inside a Docker container. Cursor does not know how to get inside that Docker container and run my code. So I cannot do that, right? So that's the main problem that I'm trying to solve here. So what I'm doing instead is I have a separate Docker container that I run with my MCP server inside. You can do that. And then I have Cursor connect to the second Docker container. Anyway, long story short, this MCP server that I just showed you, it's one that I'm going to be giving to the people on my class. And this is the goal of that MCP server. You can, in the class, as part of the code walkthrough, we do a lot of stuff with AWS, and there are servers that you have to run and check on endpoints, and is it running? Please send a request, run inference on that endpoint, all of that good stuff. And there are commands to do all of that. Like you can learn the commands and run the commands yourself. I even made the commands better, so you can just use something that's called just, that makes for the commands very simple. If you want to train a model, you say just train, and a command is going to run behind the scenes. All of that is good and old. But wouldn't be great if you just ask Cursor to do what you want to do. Stop the endpoint if it's running. You ask Cursor to do that. You don't have to remember to run the specific commands. You can just ask Cursor, and now Cursor can go to AWS using an MCP server, check if the endpoint is running. If it is, it's going to call the delete endpoint or whatever is called the tool, and it's going to do all of that process behind the scenes. And the only thing that you need to do is just ask. Here's a better one. I have a model running. Okay, so there is a model, and that model is running. And I want to test that model. To test that model, I have a data set that I sent each one of those line items or rows in my data set. I send them to the model, okay? One by one to test that model. But that data is fixed. So instead of using that data set over and over and over, because I want to evaluate things like what happens if, I don't know, what happens if this value gets too high, or what happens if this other value is empty. Instead of me generating all of that data and creating a huge data set and telling people how to run it, I can just use the power of AI and MCP to do that. So here is the thing. My MCP server knows how to invoke the model. Cursor, or the LLM that Cursor is using, knows how to generate data in any shape or form that I want. So now I can tell Cursor, call the model with 10 samples that are missing column B. And the 10 samples missing column B, Cursor or the LLM, let's say is Claude. Claude can generate those 10 samples and immediately call the model using my MCP server. So that is the power of using tools like this. It makes our lives so much better. So, easier. So hopefully I answered your question. I know it was way more than what you asked for. But yeah, can we see a quick practical example? I think I showed that. That was at 10:39 a.m. It's been 1 hour, so I think you already saw that. How authentication is handled here. I already answered that. If the system that is exposing the MCP server needs to know who I am, is that clearly defined in the specification? The answer is yes. Check the authorization section of the spec, and you will read everything that you need about that. Could you elaborate on the difference between sampling and elicitation? Seems that in both cases, the MCP server needs something from client side. That is correct. In both cases, it's communication that goes from server to client side. In case of sampling, the response is optional, but is mandatory for elicitation. Is that the right way? So, no. So the right way to think about it is that in sampling, you're asking precisely to run an LLM. You want to run a query through an LLM. That's what sampling is about. The server wants to run a query through an LLM. The server will specify what are the characteristics of the model that it would like to use, and we'll set that query, we'll get an answer back. Elicitation is the server telling the client, please ask the user, not the LLM, ask the user to enter this information. Okay, so the server will say, I need the name, first name, surname, email, and I don't know, blood type from the user. The server will tell the client that it needs all of that, would elicit that information from the client. The client will create a UI form, whatever, with all of that data, and the user will enter that data, will hit submit, and all of that data will make it into the server. That's what elicitation is. Again, elicitation is still in draft mode, okay? It's not even part of the spec. If you want to look it up, just Google MCP elicitation and it will take you to the page, because if you go to just the link of the specification, you won't see it. Okay, let me see. How can you trust a third-party MCP server? Can they potentially contain malicious code? Yes. How can you trust a third-party API? Yes. So it's the same thing. Like, we're not inventing the wheel here. You don't want to use something you don't trust, period. Right? How does an MCP client server publish its capability to an agent app user such that for the right question, the correct? I think I answered this already. So the specification specifies how the process works. So when there is a new session, the server will explain what the capabilities are, and that information will be injected in the LLM, and the LLM will decide if it needs to call any of those tools. If there is an update on the server will send a request to the client saying, hey, there was an update. Please request my capabilities back because you need the updated version. That's the way it works. Were the function calling feature supposed to serve the same purpose? Yes, the function calling feature was supposed to serve a similar purpose, specifically for tool calling, not for resources, not for sampling, not for elicitation, not for any of that. For tool calling, function calling was what this is replacing. In fact, the new API from OpenAI now supports MCP. I don't know if they kept support of function calling, but now supports MCP. That's what we're moving. Okay, this is much better. We could give Google Maps API access using tools and achieve same things. How does MCP helps here? So this is a question that I get all the time. People telling me we could have done the same thing with an API, and the answer is yes. You could have done the same thing with an API, but me, no, I couldn't have done the same thing with an API. I would have to start from scratch and build it all myself. And John, here that I'm looking at you, John, you would need to do the same thing yourself. So that is not a solution to the problem. You can build tool calling without MCP. Yes, nobody's arguing against that. But you will have to build it. Instead of using the MCP that somebody else built, you will have to build your custom implementation. Why? If we have something standard, that's what we want to use. Can you speak about privacy issues with this? Will the LLM learn from the data it retrieves? So Great question. So the reason we have abstractions, like we have a client connecting to a server, not just the LLM, not just the host with all of the data. Clients and the ones that implement this are required by the spec to keep the data private. So they're not supposed to share whatever they don't need to share with the LLM. There is data that obviously is meant for the LLM to use, like when the client retrieves resources from the server, those are meant for the LLM to use if the application decides so. But at least the tools, yes, the client should share them with the LLM, but it shouldn't be sharing with the LLM the authentication token that is using to connect to the server, or the API keys that is using to connect to the server. So that is how you keep data isolated. Okay, so that's the first thing that you need to do, to think about. You have to trust the client. If you implement it, great, but you have to trust where you put your data and what applications you use. There's no difference here with anything else. That being said, in the specification page, there is a whole section that's called, let me just, so I don't lie to you. Where is it? Specification, key changes, elicitation, security considerations. Okay, so I'm going to paste it here. All right, so I'm going to paste it in the chat. There is a section that's called security considerations. I pasted the link in the chat. In that section, you will find a bunch of scenarios where bad things could happen. Vector attacks for MCP. So you are aware of them and you protect yourself. So there are a lot of potential problems, okay? You need to keep that in mind. All righty, let me see Q&A, get back to it. By the way, if any of you want to speak and want to skip the line, you can just raise your hand. Now I'm going to keep going down. You see, I've almost answered all of them. Can you speak about, I already did that. What if you're struggling with getting the LLM to select the correct tool from the MCP server? How do you help improve it? Through prompts. You need a better prompt. Sometimes something that has happened to me is that when I ask the LLM to do something, the LLM thinks that it can do it itself and it doesn't need a tool to do it. Okay, so that happens to me all the time, and I have to specify, please check if you have an MCP tool to do this. Okay, because it's not clear from the get-go that the LLM should go and use a tool. The LLM tries to do it itself. This is one of the big downsides with MCP, guys, okay? So this is not sugarcoating this. If you're building an API, you're calling the API 100% of the time. That's it. That's period. With an MCP, advantages, disadvantages. Advantages, you can change it, you can add tools, you can connect to anything. You don't have to hard code any of that. Disadvantages, you are hoping that the LLM picks it up. It's just the way it is. As LLMs get better, obviously, this is going to get better. Okay, I assume the stochastic non-deterministic aspect of LLMs will remain a key limitation for MCPs in some applications. Yes, sir, 100%. Again, big disadvantage today. As LLMs get better, I feel this is going to get much better. For now, we just need to try a lot of prompts, refine them, make them better, and help the LLM do what we want the LLM to do. That's a key limitation. Yes, sir. Cole, go ahead.
Yeah, so I hear everyone talk about the tool aspect of MCP. I hear less about the resources and prompts piece, but just curious to get your take on like what are some undervalued aspects of MCP?
I think the biggest one is undervalued is resources. I think is huge. I wish I had access to them to use them in Cursor for the MCP that I'm building for my class. Unfortunately, most application developers went ahead and implemented tools. Obviously, I get it, the most exciting one. But resources are big because resources provide a lot of context. to the application. So you can have, like in my example, for example, the list of restaurants that are available, I can have just that file, and I can tell the LLM, hey, by the way, if you need that list, it's right here. Like you could sort of like simulate resources with a tool. Like you could have a tool that returns the list of restaurants, but that is not the same, right? I don't want to build a tool for that. A resource would be better. For my class specifically, one thing that I want to do with resources, I have a lot of documentation. It's not documentation, but it's a step-by-step walkthrough of all of the code. So I wrote all of those instructions, go here, here, here. If I show you here really quick, I think some people might appreciate this. So let me show you. I'm sharing my screen. So I built this extension for my class. And as you can see, my extension, I can click a section, and in cursor here, you get the code that's related to this extension. And here you get documentation about that specific step, right? So what is the code doing? How is it working? A high-level overview, right? And I can do that as my students navigate through everything that I want to show them. They do this, right? They go down here. And I even have these buttons here, where if I click a button, that button will run the pipeline for them. They don't need to remember the command. They can just click a button and run the pipeline, okay? There is a lot of knowledge embedded in the code and the documentation here. Wouldn't it be great if I had access to resources to allow students ask questions about my class, and instead of letting cursor figure it out based on the code, just give it the resources and say, this is a resource about Metaflow. This is what I wrote, not what your training data says. This is what I wrote. This is kind of like rack type of style thingy, but I don't want to have a rack system. I don't want to do that. I want to have it all on MCP, and resources will be a great approach to do that. Prompts are, it's not that they're not useful. I'm less excited about them, especially because prompts are linked for the user. Like, yeah, the idea with is for the server to tell the application host, I support these 10 prompts. And the application should tell you that. One example, you're using a GitHub MCP server, okay? Ideally, Claude Desktop will tell you, hey, if you type slash, I'm going to show you all of the prompts, all of the operations that you can execute. So you type slash, and Claude will automatically fill out all of the options, like autocomplete the options, saying you can commit, you can push, you can blah, blah, blah. All of those commands, those are prompts. They come from the server. And all of those commands behind the scenes, they have like the prompt. Claude can interpolate them with the proper data. What is the branch? What is the data, the status, whatever, the username, the email, whatever it needs. And it would run those behind the scenes. That's the idea of prompts. Useful, not groundbreaking, I think. So, yeah.
And so just quick follow-up to that, as you mentioned, the RAG versus resources. How do you think about that, like when to use RAG versus when to use resources?
So, well, resources here, you're giving the whole thing to the LLM and letting the LLM figure it out. Mm-hmm. That is not going to fly when you have a very large knowledge base. Mm-hmm. Number one, because of context size, and number two, because LLMs get worse answers as the context increases. So it's not that like a 2 trillion context size is not going to solve the problem with RAGs unless the LLMs get really, really good at always finding the right information in that context, right? So RAG is still king from that point of view, because you are limiting the amount of information you give the LLM. You're going to need that process of retrieval in the middle of it. But for my class, resources will be plenty for what I need. Yeah. By the way, resources is not just a replacement of RAG. You can use resources for way more than that. Like I can have my data set, the data set that my I explained to you, for example, that, or I said here, not I didn't explain it to you, but I said here that one of the functions that I'm building is the ability to invoke a model, passing data and shaping that data in different ways, okay? So that data, I have two options. I have three options. Two options, actually. Option number one is let the model, the Claude 3.5, 3.7, figure out all of that data. Or I can have a resource that's my data set. And I can use Claude with that. I can give Claude that resource and say, here is the original data. The only thing that you need to do is change one of the columns, use all of the other values. So in that case, my database or my data set becomes a resource that I share with. Resources is anything that you will upload to the model, right? Any attachments that you would provide, that would be a resource from the MCP server.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. All right, so let me go down here. In the example you gave on the local MCP server, you just gave it a name. Is there a specific field where you can explain to the LLM or the client agent which is the server good at? Or so that is part of the code. Or is it just decided based on the exposed tools? So yes, it's based on the exposed tools. When you are configuring the server, you do not have to write anything. And think about that. Like, you don't want it to do at that point, because who is responsible for writing what the server is good at? The server creator, not the agent builder. The agent builder is the one configuring the MCP server. You don't want the agent builder being responsible for writing down what the server is good at, right? So the server creator adds that information in the server. And the builder, the agent builder, the application builder only needs to point to the server, doesn't need to write anything else. So that's why it's done that way. Can you please add PayPal on your ML school so one can pay installments with PayPal or other platform that allows installments? PayPal is added through Stripe. Send me a direct message on Twitter, on X, and I'll kind of figure that out. It's just Stripe, and I think I enabled PayPal. I don't even know, but it's not enabled for every country. It's just a mess. So yeah. Send me a DM, we can figure something out. Is there any standard DNS maybe to help a model self-discover an MCP server for many websites to help surface? Not that I know of. There might be, I'm not aware of anything like this at this point in time. I'm sure that might happen. Would like to know your thoughts on MCP versus A2A versus AGI UI. Thanks. Okay, so I'm not gonna get too deep into these three because I know more of MCP than I know about the other two. AGI UI, I actually work with the team that put it together. You should check it out. This is a standard to connect agents with user interfaces. Okay, A2A is a standard to communicate to agents. MCP is a standard for an agent to communicate with tools. A2A, how do I connect two agents? How do I get two agents to talk to? I know less about A2A. I know it's Google spec. It's very recent, even more recent than MCP, but I don't know anything else to go beyond that. And again, AG UI is for connecting agents to UI applications, React, and whatnot. But the differences are that, right? They're not competing protocols. They are, they work together, okay? So they have nothing to do with each other. With diverse MCP servers for an LLM, how should a host routing protocol dynamically select or fuse contextual resources per query to optimally balance relevance, latency, and cost? That is a loaded question there. With diverse MCP servers for an LLM, how should a host routing protocol dynamically so the protocol selects which tool to use, not based on cost, not based on speed or latency, nothing like that. It selects a tool based on, does it match the task that I want to solve? If the tool claims it solves what I need to do, I'm going to call that tool. That's the only criteria right now, as far as I know, that LLMs follow, okay? So yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not sure when you say diffuse contextual resources, like you got me down a path there that I'm not sure I understand the rest of the question. If you're still online and you want to say something else, just write it down. I'll answer it. Is it possible to have a catalog of system integrations available in a sign-up form, for example, that an agent does elicitation for in real time in order to access specific customers' data? A catalog of system integrations. Mark, do you mind elaborating a little bit more? What do you mean by having a catalog of system integrations in a sign-up form?
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, so I wrote a follow-up because I realized it wasn't really clear. So my follow-up question was that if you imagine a CRM system, like a fictional CRM system that needs to pull a lot of data from different systems, like an email server, an ERP, the different social media platforms where you do marketing, etc. It needs to pull this data in order to offer its services to its users. So imagine like a fictional HubSpot sort of startup. HubSpot has done a lot of work in terms of setting up all these API integrations to pull this data in a user-friendly way for their users, and then they, of course, do a lot of database UX, you could say, for their users. Would it, in this fictional example, would it have been easier for them if they, at that point in time when they started out, if they had access to MCP and just listed all these different systems that they could access via MCP, because it's like a unified API, as you also kind of describe it, and then have an agent use something like elicitation to retrieve like the API key or whatever it might be from the user in order to access the user's data, and then pull the data and process it in the way that this fictional CRP system would do. Is that something that you can use MCP for? So you could basically say all the systems in the world are available. We can pull any type of data from any third-party system. You just have to follow this form, and then the form would handle this type of elicitation process in order to actually retrieve the data. Is that something that you see?
I think so. So let me show you something here, and this maybe this gives you ideas about this. So I don't know if you've seen Zapier MCP, and I don't know. Yeah, let me see. Okay, so I should have an account here. Just give me 1 second. We should be able to do this. Yep. I mean, I hope I don't have to enter my password here while I'm recording. Okay, I did. All right, so, okay. What do I have here? SAPs, app connections, app history. How do I do an MCP? Let me just, I don't remember. No, SAPs, maybe. I'm trying to see, this is not an MCP. I'm trying to find, I mean, there is a point to what I'm doing. There is a point to what I'm doing. Let me just create. Can I just create chatbot? Man, I don't remember how to do it right now. I'm gonna have to explain it. But anyway, this is the form interface. This is not. No, this is not the one. Okay. All right. So yeah, I'm not gonna worry about it. So the whole idea with SAP, and I don't know how to do it. Maybe agents here. I don't know how to do it right now. But I did it. So the whole idea here is that with Zapier, you go and you can, you know that Zapier supports, I don't know, thousands of actions that you can execute. Okay, so thousands of integrations. And you can create or an MCP server that's going to have 2 tools. Okay, only 2 tools. And the first tool is list every action that you have access to. And the second tool is called specific action. So they created this standard MCP server that anyone can use it to connect to any actions. And when I say an action is send an email or send a text message or turn off a light, whatever it is. But you can use that server through those two tools. It sounds like what you're saying is something similar. Well, where HubSpot could have created something like, I don't know, through elicitation, ask the user, what do you want to connect? Give me the information to connect. And behind the scenes, they will do the connection automatically or dynamically to that place and gather data and do all of that. It sounds like it's possible. I'm not willing to say whether this is better to what they have, because I will need way more information to make that determination. But it sounds like what you're trying to say, yes, it is possible they could do something like this. Just want to be clear, MCP are not a replacement for APIs. There's something completely different. APIs are not dead. MCP is not killing APIs. It's not going to kill APIs. We still need APIs. In fact, MCPs use APIs to do most of what they do right now. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks.
Do you have any implementation of MCP together? Do you have any implementations of MCP together with mind maps or knowledge graphs as a use case? I do not, so I owe you that. I do not have that. And I got to the bottom of the question. So are there any, let me check the chat really quick. I'm not going to answer the questions in the chat because it's just nuts. Like at this point, it will take me the whole day. But let me see really quick. Could you give a 2-minute overview of the ML school cohort? Yes, I can do that for sure. So it's very simple. Not the cohort. The cohort is not simple, but the overview is very simple. So the best way to do that is for me to go here and to just, all right. So this is what is going to happen. Okay, so this is what the cohort looks like. This is the URL. The whole idea with this cohort is to teach people how to build systems that work, not to build demos, not to build any of that. Okay, I've been a machine learning engineer for, I don't know, maybe 20 years. I've been coding since I was 14. I'm 44 right now. So I'm literally 30 years now coding, writing code. I've been doing this for most of my life. Okay. My goal with this cohort is to teach you how to do the same thing, not to write code, but to put together the proper components to build machine learning and AI systems that work. Okay. There are 6 sessions to the cohort. The cohort is live, just like this class. If you don't like me to say fuck and shit, don't join because I curse, is what it is. I don't work for anybody, so I can do whatever I want. What you saw today is what you get in the cohort. It's a 2-hour class that will never be 2 hours. It's always 3 hours or 3 hours and a half because I answer every question until the last student goes away. You get live access to the cohort. So when you join one time, you get to join forever, every single cohort. That means that people who attended cohort 18, which we just finished 2 weeks ago, they will join now cohort 19. Why would they do that? For 2 reasons. Number one, because I keep bringing new content. Because AI is moving freaking fast. There is always something. I literally prepared the MCP slides without elicitation, and elicitation came out. So of course, I'm going to be bringing new stuff to the cohort, and they get to benefit from that without having to pay again, ever again. They don't have to ask me permission to join the classes. They own the classes, so they can just show up. In their calendars, they're going to have links, and they just show up to classes that they want to. So there are 6 live sessions. The cohort happens over 3 weeks. Potentially, I'm going to be extending a 4th week in the future. Not sure if it's going to be for cohort 19 or cohort 20, but right now, the way it works, 6 sessions on Mondays and Thursdays, we have a session. And then on Wednesdays, we have office hours. Office hours is just Q&A. People come, people join, they ask questions. We talk about everything and anything AI ML related. Okay? You get access to a complete system. Is a system that's running right now in some companies that are Fortune 500 companies. That system is right now processing and training models that are running in Fortune 500 companies. Okay? That's how I make my money. This is the system that you get. And this system, obviously, the system has a lot more than the system itself. It has a lot of beginner knowledge and introduction and tutorials for you. But the whole system is here. The system processes data, a data set, a demo data set that we have, trains a model, evaluates the model, registers the model, deploys the model, monitors the model. The system is full of unit tests. The system is all built with open source tools. So you can run it on AWS, on your computer, on your basement, on Azure, on Google Cloud Platform. I don't care. It's a system that you get once and you deploy anywhere. I have 2 students now who've taken this system. And I say 2 students that were really advanced students. They took this whole system and they sold it to companies. Okay? What they sold is not just my class. They took the system, they sold to companies using the same template, the ability to swap the model and use the company's model. They make a few modifications and voila, they made money with it. That's how I made money as well, okay? Selling this system. So you get access to that from scratch, okay? So let me get back to here. So you get, hands-on access to all of that code walkthrough. As I explained before, I built this extension who's going to help you go through the entire system. This extension walks you through the whole thingy and explains step by step how you can do stuff. Like, for example, this is the training pipeline. If we click on the training pipeline, you get the training pipeline here. This is what trains the model. And here you get like a full explanation of how the training pipeline works and how to run it and what is the command behind that. And all of the good stuff is here, right? Here you get everything that you can do with the training pipeline. You can get, into specific steps of the training pipeline now, and we explain those step by step, like if you were 5. Okay, so that's what you get with the code walkthroughs. I already mentioned this. Lifetime access. Again, this is the most basic thing. Every single review that I get, every single feedback is like, thank you for lifetime access. And in every single class, half of my students ask me, can I join the next cohort? Yes, you can. It's lifetime. Hey, this is not monthly. You're not paying. This is not a subscription. Pay once, forget about it. Okay, I've been teaching this since March 2023. So it's been 2 years and change. And I've had 2,700 students go through this. So it's a lot of time me teaching this crap. It's been changing a lot. So this is what you're gonna get. This is cohort 18. This is changing. So if you go to the website today, this is changing. And I'm gonna explain why. This is the contents of day 1, day 2, blah, 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 day 6. Then you get the code walkthroughs, and then you get the office hours. The reason this is changing is because now for cohort 19, I'm bringing 2 new topics: rack systems and agents. Those 2, when I say agents, is how we build an agent, like the fundamentals of building agents, etc., etc. I'm also extending the model control, the MCP session. Like you saw today, something similar to what you saw today is what's going to be part of the next cohort. This is just what you saw today is just one topic of the whole cohort. It's way more than that. What else should I say? Who should, like, should you join? If you stay with me up to right now, yes, the answer is yes. If you're here listening to me, the answer is yes, period. Don't read anything else. Yes, you're like, if you understood what I said today, you're good to go. Next cohort is in August, and then the final cohort of 2025 is going to be in November. Okay. Again, if you join today or tomorrow or in August, you get access to every previous cohort and every future cohort. Okay. The only reason for you to consider to join right now is because if I raise my price, you're going to have to pay the new price. It's the way it is. People who joined cohort number 1 got it easier. They got it for cheap, obviously, because I've raised the price multiple times. I think that's it. If you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. But yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening to my pitch. Let me see. What is the timing for live sessions? Need to check if it works in my time zone. So great question. So I bounced the cohort 2 different times. So the next one is going to be 10 a.m. Miami, New York, Atlanta time. Okay. So 10 a.m. Eastern time. That's the next cohort. So if you're in Europe, in Western Europe, if you're in Spain, if you're in Portugal, if you are in France, that will be 2 p.m. in the afternoon for you, okay? The one in November goes to 2 p.m. in the afternoon Eastern time. So it will be 8 p.m. Western Europe time, okay? Or 11 a.m. Pacific time. So I bounce between those two. On top of that, obviously, you always get the recordings. Some people, life gets in the way. Some people join session 1, they cannot join session 2, they watch the recording of session 2, then they join session 3. Live sessions are better. You get to talk to me, right? We get to interact. But recordings, you get all of the information as well. Okay. Yes. So answering your question, Sam, lifetime access to future cohort means we can update your learning based on new lessons. Yes, sir. Would you provide sample projects we can build? Yes, sir. Will the course cover LLM fine tuning? I talk about fine tuning. I do not go, at least not in session 18. Listen, there's so many topics, like your mind will be blown, especially because what I want to teach you is not just a bunch of different, disconnected things. I want to teach you a whole story. That's how I structure my sessions. So session 1 starts with how do you frame problems, and we start there to how do you select, how do you process data, how do you build a model, how do you train it, how do you put it in production, how do you evaluate the model. So we go in order all the way to building a continual learning system, a system that learns by itself, right? We tell the whole art. So LLM fine-tuning is an important topic, but it's not part of the curriculum right now. I talk about things like stateful learning, stateful training and stateless training, which are a form of fine-tuning. I also talk about LoRa, which is, how do you do LoRa to fine-tune, not in the context of fine-tuning, but in the context of model optimization. How do you make a model smaller so you can actually deploy it for, in production and don't have to pay a lot of money. So those are the topics that are, I don't know, fine-tuning might come in a future lesson. We'll see. What else? What else can I answer? By the way, if you guys enjoy the session, just give it a shout out on Twitter, whatever, LinkedIn, whatever social media. That's going to help me plenty. That's going to send people my way. That's going to send people to my class. I'll probably host another one of these on a different topic. If I feel I need to prepare something for my class, I'll probably do the same thing. This was fantastic for me to help me refine my slides. Cool. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's a recent change not too long ago introducing streaming to MCP. Just curious to get your speculation and ideas on what do you think is next in the iteration of MCP.
Man, I have no idea, to be honest with you. I have no clue. I was thinking last, and I'm so like I know exactly. I have no clue because last night I was reading over the draft, the new draft that they put together, and I'm like, wow, this elicitation is really cool. It's so obvious that we needed something like that. It didn't occur to me, but it's obvious after you said what would be next, and I'm like, I don't know. I have no. I came up with nothing, so I don't know. So tell me about streaming. I don't know about streaming. Tell me about streaming. What is it for?
I think, at least from my understanding, is like very similar to, I think, streaming tokens in the UI, but streaming responses back using MCP. So maybe if you get like partial responses, you can get them back a little bit earlier in the stream. But yeah, I haven't found any use cases for it just yet. I usually tend to keep it not async, but I keep it sync and just wait for the response to come back. But yeah.
Yeah, I'll read about it. I didn't know. Is that part of the spec now, or is it what?
I think it is. I think it's in the latest spec of it. But yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll check it out. I did not know. Yeah, I don't know how to use it either, but I'll have to take a look and see. Yeah, thanks for mentioning it. Rich, I saw. I think maybe Rich was your name. I saw you like with your hand up. Maybe I was wrong. Okay.
The hand ups here.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, it was raised. What's up? So.
Yeah, so this is great, Santiago. I've been following for a bit, so great to be able to join us. And thanks for extending the time. I had to step away, and I came back, and I was pleasantly surprised that you still have it going. Question is, do we get access to the previous material that you had when we joined? Or was it just future?
Yeah, you do. Yeah. Let me show you here, sort of like what you see when you join. So just to give you an idea. But for people who obviously have access to the class, they get the session here. You have to be logged in. And this is the latest cohort. And here are all of the sessions. So they're going to have, this is, when you click here, you get access to the recording of the session, the Google Meet session chat. Like I said, I have to now share that because there's a lot of information there. And the presentation slides. So you can open all of the slides of the class. As you can see, these are the slides of session 1. Let me go back. So you get that, but you also get a bunch of important links. This is an instructional videos for the code walkthrough, the repo. You get the previous cohort session. So you can also request a certificate and do it by yourself. So in the archive, you get, so these are the code walkthroughs for the cohort 16, and the reason they are called out like this is because I had videos for each one of those. Like every session here had a video explaining the code. I moved away from videos because people don't like to spend a long time watching videos. It's much better. The extension that I built that integrates with the IDE, far better. And by the way, a lot of people feedback is like, holy shit, this thing is cool. We don't have to leave the IDE and get to walk through the IDE. That's why I kept these videos here for those who want the videos, but people don't. So you also get this. So my class used to be 100% focused on SageMaker, AWS. Since then I moved to open source tooling. And the reason I did that is so not everyone uses AWS, but I keep here the code walkthrough that's 100% focused on AWS. Several people have asked me for it. So I have a section here for them. If they want that code, they can have access to it. And after that, you get every cohort. So you get cohorts 17, 16, 15, 14. At some point, I have all the way to 14. Yeah. I mean, I also have all the way back to 1. Nobody has ever asked for those, so I don't keep those in the website. But yeah, hopefully that gives you an idea.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. What else? What else can I do to help? Is that an icon, Rich? The camera on your profile picture? What is that?
Yeah, that's me taking a picture. It was a long time ago.
Okay. Anything else I can do to help? No? Yes? Maybe? Oh, thank you, Cole. I see the, okay, so streaming, streamable HTTP. Okay, yeah, I read about this. Yeah, thank you. I've never gone into the transports. Transports is one of those low-level details that I ignore. I shouldn't, but it was like, you do your thing. I don't care. Yeah, I should read it because, yeah, I'll read it. Nothing else? All right, so I'm going to cut it now. We are here. We've been here for 2 hours and 17 minutes, a little bit more. What is the current price for your next cohort? Is the one that you see on the website. Price changes based on where you live. So depending on your country, that's going to be the price. So whatever you see when you go to the ml.school, that's how much you pay. If you looked at my price, I'm on the US, I'm going to be paying the highest price, obviously. Sunny Lisbon, I'm going to be close. In a couple of days, I'm going to Madrid. I mean, not close, but relatively close to Lisbon. You know, the country next door. Let me put it that way. Yeah, I mean, Edgar, go ahead.
Sorry. I missed.
You clicked on the wrong button. All right. So if you guys don't have anything else, I'm happy to stay if you guys have any questions. If not, I'm happy to leave. Let me just 1, 2. All right. So if you have any questions, you know where to hit me up. Find me on X, find me on LinkedIn, send me a message, join my school. I'm going to make you sweat, and I'm going to make you much better than what you are. That I can promise. Oscar, right when I was saying bye. There you go.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was absent for some minutes, so maybe this question was asked before, but I need to know if I enroll of the course, what I'm going to be able to actually at the end of the course. What is this course for? Am I going to be able to build a system, so on and so on? I just need that, executive version of the course.
It's a great question, and you're not going to like the answer. The answer is it depends on you. Some people, I'm going to give you the best way I can answer this question is to give you different examples from my students, okay? So some people have been able to get a job. And the reason they have been able to get a job after struggling interview after interview is because I gave them the talking points and the knowledge for them to show that they know what they're talking about. So let me just give you like a high level example, okay? So this is a real example. Somebody's having an interview and that person asked the interviewer, how are you guys evaluating your models? And the interviewer explained, and he's like, have you guys considered doing error analysis? And the interviewer is, what do you mean? And he's like, well, with error analysis, you can do data, and this is what you can data. That person got the job. That person sent me a message and said, dude, it was the error analysis what did it. It was exactly, I got it from your class 3 days later. I explained that to an interviewer, and he's like, yeah, you know what you're doing. So that's one example of something that you're going to be able to get. So that's theoretical knowledge they're going to be able to get from my class. Some other students, as I mentioned, they're able to get the template that I gave them, use it, and sell it to another company, or use it in their own companies. Hey, I have a model, and I want to deploy that model in production. I want to retrain that model automatically. I want to monitor that model. I'm going to get what Santiago is giving me, and I'm going to use it on my own company. That's the second outcome for those people. Very different than getting a job, but that's also a valid outcome. For some other people, for the first time, they're seeing a system, how it works, and all of the components that are part of that system. So what are you going to be able to do? It really depends on where you are today and where you want to go in the future. If you join the class, but you're barely starting out as a developer, you're going to leave the class with a lot of theoretical knowledge and a lot of doors. You're going to know where the doors are for you to cross the doors. I'm not going to make you a 10-year experienced engineer in 3 weeks. That's not going to happen. I'm not going to give you a job at the end of 3 weeks, right? And that's kind of obvious, but I like to tell people that. I'm going to take you where you are, and I'm going to push you up 1, 2, or 3 levels. But it starts on where you are. Does that make sense?
I meant what I meant is the course is production oriented. This is to implement models, kind of a point of view of production implementation, not only testing or just stay on like a typical class that I have been through many times. Right?
Yeah. So the course is focused. It's number one is hands-on. You have theoretical component to it. Those are the live sessions, and you get the code walkthroughs and the code component where you're gonna be writing code. There are about like 100 assignments that I'm gonna give to you. For cohort 18, we're gonna be building a project from session 1 all the way to session 6. So this, for the first time at the end of session 1, I'm gonna give you one project to build, and you have to take it to a point. And after session 2, you're gonna have to take it to a second level, et cetera, et cetera. So that is what the course is. It's very hands-on. You are going to be uncomfortable with the code because there is a lot of things that you might see for the first time in your life. Like, I have no idea what this is about. Hopefully the course will answer those questions for you. I'm struggling. I do not understand if I answer your question. So help me, like, fine tune your prompt and see if I can give you a better answer to it.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Nothing else? That's it? That is it? We're 46 now. We were 400 at some point. We're 46. So we've lost 90% of people. All right, so I'm going to count up to 3. 1, 2, 3. I'll see you guys. Stay in touch. I'll see you. I will post on my X account if I do this again and the topic that we're going to be talking about. Bye-bye.